look at this move on Deron Bland.
that is an amazing route in that close of space. And here's CeeDee Lamb watching it on the big screen.
And, I tried to do a strategy, and then I tried to do that strategy, and it didn't work.
Ugh.
At the midpoint now of the 2025 NFL season, and in this video, we're going to be talking about what we learned from NFL Week 9. A lot of really good games, I would say, a lot of intriguing storylines and angles that we can take from all the games that took place. And obviously, the trade deadline at the recording of this video is today too. So we'll talk about some of that throughout this video, but not too much because, ultimately, we still want to recap the games. But a lot of surprising outcomes, I would certainly say. First of all, a thrilling game between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Chicago Bears, as the Bears won that, winning 47-42 on a game-winning touchdown by Colston Loveland. Just an absolutely atrocious job by the Bengals defense executing after the points onslaught that both teams put on that performance. That was just an amazing game. An upset between the Vikings and the Lions, and the return of J.J. McCarthy putting on a solid performance for sure too, getting an upset in a great divisional NFC North win. Other games that took place, of course, the Steelers beating the Colts at home too, giving the Colts their first really humbling loss of the season. A lot of people have talked about the Colts being the most surprising team this year in terms of a dominant standpoint, but the Steelers defense was able to show some semblance of life and really capitalize in that performance. Then another surprising team that's been great throughout this year, as the New England Patriots won, moving on to a 7-2 record, defeating the Atlanta Falcons. Drake May is playing at a high level, and Mike Vrabel has really changed the culture already in one season for this team and just really transformed everything about it. Another upset that we had between the Carolina Panthers and the Green Bay Packers. The Packers were 13.5-point favorites. The Panthers ended up winning the game. Rico Dowdle bludgeoning the Packers defense, and also, unfortunately for the Packers, they lost Tucker Kraft with a torn ACL for the season too. So just a lot of adversity for the Packers, but like I said, a lot of surprising outcomes and performances throughout this week. A great matchup between the Chiefs and the Bills. The Bills ended up really dominating really for the entire game. The Chiefs struggled in terms of an offensive efficiency standpoint. The Commanders ended up basically, it seems like, losing Jaden Daniels for the entire season in that blowout loss to the Seahawks, as the Seahawks won 38-14. Sam Darnold and Jackson Smith-Njigba playing at a high level, but Jaden Daniels dislocating his elbow in that. It just absolutely hurts, man, for them, because he really should not have been in the game, and that's a fact. And then obviously the last game that took place for NFL Week 9 between the Arizona Cardinals and the Dallas Cowboys, it really went how, if you look at the Cowboys defense and just how things have shaped up for this team so far, it went how really you expected it to. The defense has been bad, and obviously the offense has been one of the most dominant units in the league throughout this year, but the past couple of performances, it's kind of catching up in terms of them having to feel all of the pressure, knowing that they have to create points and stuff like that too, and ultimately you saw them have multiple fumbles with Javonte Williams, Jake Ferguson, causing Dak Prescott to stress in the offense to have to try to climb back, and the Cardinals with Jacoby Brissett, Marvin Harrison Jr. making Deron Bland look crazy. They dominated in that game, so it was just a lot of interesting angles and games to talk about. We're going to talk about it a lot throughout this video, as we always do, for this NFL Week 9 recap, but it's crazy that we're already halfway going into the season, man. Time truly does fly, but we're going to enjoy it continually, and also, the playoffs is going to be amazing too, though, but we still have a long time before then, but man, there's a lot of good games from this NFL Week 9 slate. But with that being said, though, guys, before we get further into this NFL Week 9 recap, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and X at Swaggy Russ, and TikTok at Swaggy Russ 2 for shorts, reels, all content, things of that nature too as well. Stay tuned for a lot more videos in my power rankings video for every single NFL week. For this upcoming week, it'll be going into NFL Week 10. Then stay tuned for more NBA videos that I'll still be having. Been a little bit more busy, but for sure we have a lot to talk about because the season is still at the beginning stages and a lot to ensue and happen as well, of course. But with all that being said, let's talk about what we learned from NFL Week 9. In the first game for NFL Week 9, we saw the return of Lamar Jackson for the Baltimore Ravens, as the Ravens cruised by the Dolphins, winning 28-6, getting their second straight victory and their third win of the season, moving on to a 3-5 record, and the Miami Dolphins are 2-7. Just a classic Lamar Jackson / Baltimore Ravens on both sides of the football, playing very complimentary football, having 3 total takeaways, forcing 2 fumbles, forcing Tua Tagovailoa to throw an interception to Malachi Starks. Just a great performance from Lamar Jackson. At times, of course, in the beginning of the game, it looked like maybe not necessarily rust, but he was still trying to, get things back, being acclimated, being back in the lineup after not playing since that Chiefs game in late September. But Lamar Jackson put on a great performance, especially from spreading the football out, things to that nature too. In the passing game, he completed 18 out of his 23 passing attempts for 204 passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns. Derrick Henry also was very efficient in the running game, having 19 carries for 119 rushing yards. And Zay Flowers, he led the team in receiving yards with 5 receptions for 64 receiving yards. Isaiah Likely had 3 receptions for 60 receiving yards too as well. And then Charlie Kolar had a receiving touchdown. Mark Andrews had 2 receiving touchdowns, and Rashad Bateman had a receiving touchdown as well. So the Ravens, they're a very interesting team right now. We know that this definitely wasn't the start that they imagined that they would have. Their fans, or really anyone in the NFL, foresaw the Ravens starting off to a 1-5 start. But with that though, it can be a blessing in disguise, as after they came off of the bye week from before that Bears game, rattling off 2 straight wins and now getting their 3rd win of the season. They're 2 wins away from having a 500 record. And if you look at the rest of their schedule after this game, against the Dolphins, they play against the Vikings, which the Vikings, I mean, they play against the Lions really well in week 9, as they won 27-24 in upset fashion with the return of JJ McCarthy. They play against the Browns in week 11, the Jets, then the Bengals. If they're able to win all of those games, they would have a 7-5 record, and that would be maybe a monumental task, but honestly, it's very realistic to see them potentially winning all of those games and having a 7-5 record at that point. So that would be perfect for them, and honestly, I think that's a very likely reality. But also at the same time too, the Steelers are still the first team in the division right now, and they put on a great performance as they beat the Colts in week 9. So certainly a lot for the Ravens to make up, but this is a great performance for them on both sides. For the Miami Dolphins, it's just been a tumultuous season for them. They ended up firing their GM Chris Greer after this matchup. Really, it's just been something that's been brewing for a while. Mike McDaniel, he's going to remain the head coach of the Dolphins for the rest of the season, at least according to Adam Schefter. So I don't know, man. The Dolphins, this has been a horrible season for them. They're 2-7. I honestly don't think that they started off the game bad. I mean, they were driving the Baltimore Ravens defense down the field, but they had some untimely turnovers, and that just ended up catching up to them, and they weren't able to find any offensive rhythm throughout the game. So really just a classic Baltimore Ravens matchup that we saw with Lamar Jackson returning. Some things I would say, like their defense, like I just mentioned, getting driven down the field by the Dolphins, that was kind of concerning. Ultimately, they were able to make stops, so that's what mattered most. But this team can just continue to get more healthy and stay healthy, and Lamar is in the lineup. The Baltimore Ravens are going to continue to be a fixture and one of the best teams in the AFC and the league overall. The San Francisco 49ers got a pretty decisive win over the New York Giants, winning 34-24, as they now have a 6-3 record and the Giants fall to 2-7. And it's kind of another bittersweet game and victory for the 49ers, as they have suffered another key defensive injury with their rookie first-round pick from this 2025 NFL draft, and Micah Williams, who tore his ACL on that forbidden MetLife Stadium turf. Don't want to feed much into MetLife being one of the worst injury-plagued stadiums, but it just sucks for the 49ers, who have continued to deal with a plethora of injuries this season. We all know with Fred Warner and Nick Bosa, 2 of the top defensive players in the league, period, but obviously to this team being out for the season, and now your rookie first-round pick from this year's draft out as well too. That just hurts, man. It really does. I mean, shout out to Alfred Collins, the rookie second-round pick who they drafted this year. He's been really solid throughout the year, but now losing your first-round pick after your defense has already dealt with that many injuries, it sucks, man. But getting into the game though, like I said, the 49ers got the win, and ultimately that's what they'll take away from this game as a positive light amidst of all the injuries that they faced throughout this year. Mac Jones looked better in this performance than he did against the Texans, and honestly, I mean, Texans have one of the best defenses in the league. The Giants, they have some pieces, but they're not overall consistent, and Mac Jones played very efficiently. He completed 19 out of his 24 passing attempts for 235 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey dominated in both the running game and the receiving game, as he has constantly continued to do, not only this season but throughout his career. As in this game, he had 28 carries for 106 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, and in the receiving game, he had 5 receptions for 67 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. So 2 touchdowns on the game for him, alongside of 173 all-purpose yards. Brian Robertson Jr. also had 5 carries for 53 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown as well. Juwan Jennings had 4 receptions for 41 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown, and the 49ers defense was able to make plays when they needed to seal off the game. Jackson Dart, though, I think he played pretty solidly as well too. He's been really having a really good rookie year so far since he was inserted into the starting lineup earlier this year. In this game, he completed 24 out of his 33 passing attempts for 191 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns, alongside with on the ground 8 carries for 56 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown as well too. Also connecting to players in the receiving game like a Theo Johnson and Gunnar Osowski for a receiving touchdown. Unfortunately though, man, they lost Cam Scatterbu in week 8 against the Eagles in that loss, and this is going to hamper this team a little bit more, alongside of already losing Malik Neighbors earlier in the year with a torn ACL injury too. Just honestly 2 injury plagued teams in this matchup, but overall the 49ers, we know they're the better team, and they ended up getting a win, getting their 6th win of this 2025 NFL season. This matchup between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Tennessee Titans was actually closer than I'm sure most people would have expected, especially with the Titans having a 14-7 lead at the end of the first quarter. But reality set in, Los Angeles Chargers being the better team ended up winning the game 27-20, as they now have a 6-3 record and the Titans fall to an abysmal 1-8. It's a great win for the Chargers, but unfortunately for them, Joe Alt is out for the season with an ankle injury, and just adds to the plethora of injuries that this team has had. I think Justin Herbert really had a great performance in this matchup, completing 19 out of his 29 passing attempts for 250 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and only 1 pick. Also in the running game too, he was able to move his legs and show his mobility as well too, as he's had to at various junctures this season, but also since Jim Harbaugh became the head coach last season in 2024. As Herbert had 9 carries for 57 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. And then receiving wise, Rondé Gaskin II, he continues to play very solidly solidly for this offense overall in Los Angeles, as he had 5 receptions for 68 receiving yards. Quentin Johnson had the receiving touchdown. Scott Matlock did as well too. Defensively, the Chargers were able to get 4 sacks on Titans and getting home on Cam Ward, as Odafe Owe had 2 sacks on the game. I think they really just put a complete performance on tape, and probably a closer game than they would have liked it to be, especially against the Titans and the type of season that they've had. But overall, getting the win is what was most important. And for Cam Ward, I mean, he really didn't get to spread the ball out a lot, but really that's the season in a nutshell for the Titans, as they are deficient of weapons there. Rumors about players like a Calvin really getting traded, things of that nature too as well. I mean, there's just not a lot of creativity or explosion to this season, especially Brian Callahan being fired earlier in the year just really showed that this team is really stuck, and they're going to need to make a great coaching hire next year for the 2026 season to hopefully have a coach that can get the best out of a Cam Ward. But ultimately though, what we learned from this game is that the Los Angeles Chargers are still one of the key fixtures in the AFC. In the return of JJ McCarthy, the Minnesota Vikings got a huge divisional NFC North win over the Detroit Lions, winning 27-24 in Detroit, moving them to a 500 record, being 4-4, and the Lions fall to 5-3. Yeah, man, just an absolute shocking performance, or I would say outcome, in terms of the Vikings. They were just playing complete football on both sides, and that shouldn't be surprising, especially the type of defense that the Vikings has had the past couple of years under defensive coordinator Brian Flores. But JJ McCarthy, in his first game back since week 2, he was very efficient. He didn't necessarily throw for the most passing yards in this game, as he completed 14 out of his 25 passing attempts for 143 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 pick. But ultimately, like I said, it was complementary football on both sides for the Minnesota Vikings.
Rushing wise, Aaron Jones had 9 carries for 78 rushing yards, and JJ McCarthy had a nice rushing touchdown as well to himself.
Players like a Jordan Addison, I mean, he didn't really go too crazy, as he had 2 receptions for 48 receiving yards, but Justin Jefferson, he had a receiving touchdown, having 6 receptions for 47 receiving yards, and TJ Hawkinson, their tight end, had a receiving touchdown as well too. Like I said, it was just a defense that really showed up and put on a clinic against the Detroit Lions. Eric Wilson had 2 sacks in the game. Javon Hargrave had a sack as well too. And the defense overall in this game had 5 sacks, so it was just really impressive for what the team was able to do, limiting one of the most explosive offenses in the league in the Detroit Lions. And Jared Goff, I mean, I don't think he necessarily played horrible, especially from a stat perspective. If you look at the box score, he completed 25 out of his 37 passing attempts for 284 passing yards and 2 touchdowns. But really the key against the Detroit Lions, because you know their identity is running the football, being a physical type of team, but they weren't able to really do that at all in this game. Actually, they weren't. David Montgomery only averaged 3.5 yards per carry. Jahmyr Gibbs only averaged 2.8 yards per carry, as David Montgomery had only 11 carries for 40 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown, and Jahmyr Gibbs only had 9 carries for 25 rushing yards in this game. So Vikings were able to limit a lot of the strong suits for the Lions. Amon-Ra St. Brown, though, he did have a pretty good game, I would say, overall, as he had 9 receptions for 97 receiving yards. Sam Laporta had 6 receptions for 97 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. And Jameson Williams had 4 receptions for 66 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. But like I said, ultimately, the Vikings, they were able to make plays when they needed to, and they won this game by 3 points. And it just says a lot to this Vikings team, as they're one of the most well-coached teams in the league. We know what Kevin O'Connell has been as a coach in this league since becoming the head coach for the Vikings in 2022. He's been one of the best coaches, and especially offensive minds in the league. We know that. But just overall, he knows how to run a program, and he gets the best and maximizes the best out of his players. And if JJ McCarthy can just continue to play efficient, make plays when the team needs to, getting it to his playmakers and things of that nature, the Vikings, they're going to be a potential fixture in the NFC in terms of a playoff picture standpoint for sure. And for the Lions, though, I mean, it's crazy because the Lions swept the Vikings last year, of course, with Sam Darnold having the type of season that the Vikings had, going 14-3, things of that nature as well too. But I think that this game really just summarizes what we know from this season already, is that nothing is a surefire win. It never has been in the NFL, and this season in particular, teams can punch you in the mouth, and sometimes that'll be the biggest difference. But the Vikings, they got a great win in the NFC North, getting their 4th win of the season. In an exciting finish to a matchup between the New England Patriots and the Atlanta Falcons, the Patriots won this game, winning 24-23, getting their 7th win of the season, moving to a 7-2 record, and the Falcons falling to 3-5. And the Patriots, alongside of teams, for example, like the Colts and teams of that nature, has been one of the most surprising teams from a success standpoint this year. And the biggest reason why, or I wouldn't say the biggest reason, because I mean, obviously it's a team game, and Mike Vrabel, he has done an amazing job really revitalizing this Patriots team that was lifeless the past couple of years. But it's that Drake May in his sophomore season, man. He's been playing really clean and efficient football. He had an interception in this game against the Falcons, but ultimately he still made plays the Patriots needed to, and they ended up winning the game. Although the Patriots, they were up 24-14 at one point, and like I said, the final score was 24-23. So the Falcons did try to rally back, but ultimately it was to no avail. And Drake May in this game, he completed 19 out of his 29 passing attempts for 259 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and that 1 pick that I mentioned. In the absence of Ramondre Stevenson being out in this game, the running game wasn't too crazy. Travion Henderson, for example, he had 14 carries, but only for 55 rushing yards. And Terrell Jennings, he did have a rushing touchdown. That was a solid thing for them. But like I said about Drake May, he was able to get into his playmakers. For example, Demario Douglas, he had 4 receptions for 100 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. Hunter Henry, their tight end, had 4 receptions for 51 receiving yards. And Stephon Diggs, he had a receiving touchdown as well too. So they were able to get in the end zone when they needed to, and ultimately their defense was able to hold things down, as they have really this entire season. We all knew that they made some moves, signing players like Milton Williams. They just extended Marcus Jones in the secondary. But really, this defense just plays great collectively, and that was on full display against the Falcons, as at least in the first half, they were able to really control the game. In the second half, like I mentioned, the Falcons, they were able to get some more things going, especially from a Drake London standpoint. He missed the previous game against the Miami Dolphins when they were embarrassed 34-10. Drake London really reminded the people why he's one of the best young wide receivers in the league, as he had 9 receptions for 118 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns, all of their touchdowns in the game. One thing also to look at though for the Falcons is that they haven't really been getting the ball in a creative manner to a Bijan Robinson the past few weeks. I mean, in this game, for example, he only had 12 carries for 46 rushing yards. I believe in the game against the Dolphins when they lost, he only had 9 carries. That's not a recipe for success, as you're clearly seeing, as they now have a 3-5 record. You need to get the ball to your best playmakers, man. And Michael Penix Jr., as he didn't play in that Dolphins game, of course, Kirk Cousins made the start. Michael Penix Jr. played solid. Like I said, they played better in the second half, as he completed 22 out of his 37 passing attempts for 221 passing yards and all those 3 touchdowns to Drake London, which is also kind of a funny theme, because when looking at Michael Penix Jr. throughout his young career so far, he loves to get the ball to Drake London, even over a lot of people. But for me, man, this offense just needs to be more creative under offense coordinator Zach Robinson and personnel to that nature. But like I said, for the Patriots, they still continue to be the #1 team in their division in AFC East, and even that's with the Bills getting a win over the Chiefs. And it just says a lot, like I said, about Mike Vrabel being arguably Coach of the Year, and Drake May, despite only being in his second season, having close to an MVP caliber year for sure. I talked about a surprising outcome between the Lions and the Vikings earlier. Well, this was another one, as the Pittsburgh Steelers defeated the Indianapolis Colts, handing the Colts their second loss of the season, winning 27-20, as the Steelers are now 5-3, and like I said, the Colts are now 7-2. And really, for a lot of people, they were probably like, oh yeah, that's the Daniel Jones that I know. As Daniel Jones, man, he had 5 turnovers in the game with 3 interceptions and 2 fumbles lost. Look, I'll say this, the Colts, they've had a great start to the season so far, and I still think they'll be one of the best teams in the AFC, especially going down the line into the playoffs. But I mean, like I continue to say throughout these weekly season recap videos and things of that nature as well, there's no team that's above another right now in terms of being in the upper echelon of the NFL. There's so much parity right now, to where I know the Colts have been dominant, being one of the best offenses in the league, and also defenses being very consistent as well too, and opportunistic. But when you look at their strength of schedule, they still haven't played the biggest contenders, and I know in a couple of weeks they'll play against the Chiefs, so we'll also see where they're at from that perspective. But yeah, I mean, it really showed that first and foremost the Steelers, because the Steelers defense have been struggling the previous couple of weeks. We also saw what happened against the Bengals, how they lost against the Packers, things like that. They really responded, man, and like I said, getting those 5 turnovers sent a huge message, really, honestly. And for the Steelers also defensively too, Joey Porter Jr. had a sack, Alex Highsmith had 2 sacks, Keanu Benton had a sack, and TJ Watt had a sack as well too. So total for the game, they had 5 sacks and, like I said, 3 interceptions and 2 fumble recoveries. That's huge, man. That's really great. So really playing complementary football for an Aaron Rodgers who, despite all of the, question marks for the defense for the Steelers throughout the year so far, Aaron Rodgers has been the definition of consistent. He completed 25 out of his 35 passing attempts in this game for 203 passing yards and 1 touchdown. Jalen Warren had 2 rushing touchdowns on the game, and Calvin Austin had 5 receptions for 56 receiving yards, alongside with a Pat Freiermuth having a receiving touchdown. I think the defense really helped set the tone for the Steelers and helped them set up short fields to be able to get the ball to an Aaron Rodgers so he can distribute it to his playmakers and be efficient within this game. For the Colts, though, like I said, man, Daniel Jones struggled, but despite that performance, he still had a career year so far. I also think a huge thing for the Steelers in this game, they were able to stop the run at a high level. Jonathan Taylor has been the best running back this season so far, and he wasn't able to really get any success at all. He only had 14 carries for 45 rushing yards, and Daniel Jones had their lone rushing touchdown of the game. I will say, though, from a receiving standpoint, the Colts continue to have one of the most underrated receiving corps in the league. Alec Pierce had 6 receptions for 115 receiving yards. Michael Pittman Jr. had 9 receptions for 115 receiving yards, and Josh Downs had 6 receptions for 57 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. But I think a really great thing for the Steelers is they were able to limit and take away Daniel Jones' 2 favorite playmakers in Jonathan Taylor and Tyler Warren, as Tyler Warren only had 5 receptions for 26 receiving yards. So that really played a huge difference, but also alongside with the turnovers and just them playing great on all 3 phases of the football, and that helped the Steelers get their 5th win of the season, still remaining first in the AFC North, even though the conversation and things like that too, like I talked about earlier with the Ravens game, is that you can see an opportunity for the Ravens to go on a run and try to get the division back. Right now, the Steelers, they have control, grasp over it. They're 5-3 going into NFL Week 10. A defensive battle between 2 of the best defenses in the league, in the Denver Broncos and the Houston Texans, where the Broncos prevailed, winning 18-15, as they now have a 7-2 record, and the Texans fall to 3-5. With CJ Stroud suffering a concussion in this game, it really helped tilt things in favor of the Broncos from a standpoint of you have the better quarterback in the game going against a backup in Davis Mills. And even though the offense at times was stagnant because that was a result of the defenses being so effective and great, they ultimately on that final drive was able to get into goal range, and their kicker Will Lutz ended up winning the game for them. So I think that that's something to take away from them for sure. But defensively, like I said, if we're going to talk about these teams being 2 defensive juggernauts, let's talk about the defensive stats, because like I said, I mean, we'll talk about Bo Nix and how, he made a few plays for sure, and things of that nature too, offensively, getting into his playmakers. But like I said, defense is the main art from this game. As Zach Allen had a sack, Jonathan Cooper had a sack as well too, alongside with a Dre Greenlaw, and Andre Tillman having a half sack, alongside with a Malcolm Roach having a half sack. So the Broncos had 4 sacks in this matchup, and they didn't intercept the ball at all. But like I said, this defense is absolutely devastating, especially against a struggling Texas offensive line. It was kind of shocking that they didn't make more plays, but the Texans, they continue to improve, at least from an offensive perspective, but not enough, as all of their points came via Kayemi Fairbairn from a field goal standpoint, as the Texans kicked 5 field goals to get their 15 points. But it was different for the Broncos offense. Bo Nix completed 18 out of his 37 passing attempts for 173 passing yards and 2 touchdowns and just 1 pick. The 2 touchdowns going to RJ Harvey with 5 receptions for 51 receiving yards and a touchdown, and the other one going to Cortland Sutton on a nice reception for a 30-yard receiving touchdown. So the Broncos, even though at times there's been a lot to be desired from their offense, they've done enough to win 7 out of their first 9 games, and it's a testament in terms of the job that Sean Payton has really done to create culture up there in Mile High, but also their defense under defensive coordinator Vance Joseph being one of the best in the league, continuing to lead the league in sacks like they did last year in the 2024 season. It just shows a lot about this team being an absolute devastating defense. And for the Houston Texans, they're hoping to get their QB1 and CJ Stroud back. That was not a great hit that you saw in that replay when he suffered that concussion. They need him back desperately because they still want to at least be able to try to make a run to be an AFC wild card and that wild card picture in the AFC, because their division is going to continue to get harder and harder to win. Even though the Colts lost against the Steelers, the Texans are still 4 games back in them, so that's a lot of ground to make up. And even if they were to, for example, beat the Colts 2 times in a head-to-head matchup, that doesn't guarantee anything at all. So the Texans, they're struggling. They need their quarterback back for sure. At least they had players like Nico Collins returning this game, who had 7 receptions for 75 receiving yards, and Dalton Schultz had 6 receptions for 77 receiving yards. But like I said, their offense was relatively stagnant and didn't make the plays when they needed to because they weren't able to get in the end zone. But for the Broncos, they continue to be one of the better stories and best teams in the league so far, moving on to a 7-2 record, winning 18-15 on the road.
I'm gonna stay in my lane. I don't want no defensive player come and chew me out about what the fuck I'm doing.
We just got to play complementary football. Like, we put the ball in the end zone and go up a point at the end, finish the fucking game. Like, just end it. Like, that's it. Like, that's what we need to do. Just end the fucking game. Like, make them get us the ball back. Let us fucking go to 22 victory and let's end the game. That's how I feel.
If anything, well, honestly, that video is a nutshell of the defensive frustration that the Cincinnati Bengals have had to deal with the past couple of seasons, as they lost this game in the final seconds against the Chicago Bears, losing 47-42, as the Bears got their 5th win of the season, moving to 5-3, and now the Bengals are again looking like they're having a lost season, being 3-6. And like I said, the Bengals had just went up on a touchdown, and in the 4th quarter, the Bengals defense had a busted coverage and allowed Colston Loveland to score a huge touchdown at the end of the game. That just is bad, man. That's absolute shite. And it's crazy, man. The Cincinnati Bengals are the first team to score 38 plus points in a game in back-to-back games and lose both. First team to do that since the 1966 Giants. It just really encapsulates how awful their defense is. And I mean, we could go through the offensive stats for the Bengals. It's kind of like what Jamar Chase said. It's crazy because it's crazy to me how funny it was, like how him and Chase Brown, they were so explicit with the media. But like I said, I can't blame them because they did all they could do. They scored 42 points and had the game pretty much won at the end, but their defense ended up choking the game away. But let's talk about the offensive stats for the Bengals before we move on to the Bears. T. Higgins, he dominated in this game, having 7 receptions for 121 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Jamar Chase, as he continued to be one of the top 2 or number 1 receivers in the league, as he had 6 receptions for 111 receiving yards. Andre Yoshibas had 5 receptions for 66 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. Noah Fant had a receiving touchdown. Chase Brown mostly dominating the receiving game, as he had 8 receptions for 75 receiving yards alongside with his 37 rushing yards. This team did enough to win, like I said. I mean, it's really inexcusable, the performance that their defense put on, and really the Bears, especially under an offensive-minded head coach and Ben Johnson, the creativity, the different trick plays and things of that nature as well that we saw too. They were able to just have their way against the Bengals defense and ultimately execute in the end. Caleb Williams, he completed 20 out of his 34 passing attempts, throwing for 280 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns. He also had a receiving touchdown in this game too, having 2 receptions for 22 receiving yards. Like I said, that creativity that they have in this offense. And the receiving touchdown was passed to from a DJ Moore in the trick play, kind of similarly to what Ben Johnson did with the Lions from a Amon-Ra St. Brown standpoint, as he played the trick play quarterback. But Kyle Mananangi, as DeAndre Swift was injured in this game, he bludgeoned the Bengals from a running game perspective, nearly averaging 7 yards per carry, having 26 carries for 176 rushing yards. No touchdowns, but like that really spoke enough for. Caleb Williams also had 53 rushing yards on 5 carries. Britton Brown had a rushing touchdown, and DJ Moore had a rushing touchdown. Colson Loveland, like I said, he had that game-winning touchdown, but also in this game, he had 6 receptions for 118 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. Alamade Zaccheaus had a receiving touchdown, and DJ Moore had 4 receptions for 72 receiving yards. It was just an absolute offensive clinic by both sides, but the Bears ended up making the final play to win the game at the end, and I mean, it's just crazy how frustrating really this Bengals team is. I can't imagine what it's like to be a Bengals fan, especially after seeing these past couple of years, last year in particular, getting hot at the end of the season to still miss the playoffs, and then early this year starting off 2-0 for the first time in forever, then Joe Burrow being out until December potentially at the earliest, coming back with a turf toe injury, and then losing games like this when you should have won against the Bears. It just has to be frustrating for sure. But ultimately, the Bears, I mean, they've been one of the more surprising teams this year in terms of an instant success standpoint, with Ben Johnson being the head coach. Caleb Williams had a really good game in this matchup, playing better, especially after the loss that they had against the Ravens, and they ended up getting their 5th win of the season. Being 13.5-point favorites going into this game, you would say that this was an easy game for the Packers to win and get right against the Panthers. Absolutely not. And the Carolina Panthers won this game, upsetting the Green Bay Packers, winning 16-13, as the Panthers are now 5-4, and the Packers move on to a 5-2-1 record. Really, this Panthers team has been one of the more pleasant surprises this season in terms of from a competitive standpoint, as they've collectively, especially their defense, I believe they have one of the most underrated defenses in the league. No one talks about them, but all they do is make plays and limit offenses. And it says a lot too about the Packers offense, as the Packers, they didn't have 1 punt in this game, and they still only scored 13 points, ultimately losing. You made the argument that Jordan Love should have had 2 picks in this game, and ironically, it was Jordan Love's birthday in this matchup, and they still ended up losing and playing bad. And let's go through the stats real quick for the Packers before we get into the Panthers. Jordan Love, he dropped back a lot, completing 26 out of his 37 passing attempts for 273 passing yards, no passing touchdowns, and throwing a bad interception. And also, arguably, he should have had a second interception in the game on the 4th down, which the DB just dropped the ball, which was crazy. It was basically a gift wrap throw, but he dropped it. But anyways, beyond that though, it's just the constant seesaw of performances for the Packers offense. One week they play amazing, winning 35-25 against the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the next week they play against the Panthers and lose this game, when obviously they have more collective talent, but honestly that doesn't matter because it's an any given Sunday type of mentality. Josh Jacobs, I thought, played really solid in this game. He had 17 carries for 87 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. Romeo Doubs had 7 receptions for 91 receiving yards in this game too. But overall though, the second leading receiver in this game was Christian Watson for 2 receptions and 58 receiving yards, and someone is going to have to step up. I know Jaden Reed is coming back soon, eventually, after being hurt early in the season, but with Tucker Kraft tearing his ACL in this game, being their #1 pass catcher in this offense, being really the best receiving threat and offensive weapon in this offense besides Josh Jacobs, it's going to hurt them for sure, and they're going to need Luke Musgrave, who was a solid tight end for them a couple of years ago, but with the emergence of Tucker Kraft, he's kind of taken a back seat and had less snaps. But Tucker Kraft being out, that's going to hurt this Packers offense for now and for the rest of the season, and potentially to try to compete in the playoffs. So that sucks for sure. But overall, I mean, the defense for the Packers, I would say they played solid too. I mean, they only allowed the Panthers to score 16 points. But from a line of scrimmage perspective, Rico Dowdle absolutely had his way. And it's crazy, man. Chuba Hubbard has really fallen out of favor, and it's not because of his play, it's because of the play of Rico Dowdle, as Rico Dowdle had 25 carries for 130 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, just bludgeoning and making plays, and he's really fit in perfectly for the Panthers. And I know Chuba Hubbard is on this roster, but Rico Dowdle, it's clear that he's the running back 1 for this team, and it makes it interesting in terms of potentially in the offseason if they're gonna, extend Rico Dowdle, which I think they should, and if they make a decision on the Chuba Hubbard, who they extended this past offseason, if they maybe trade him or something like that. I don't know, but Rico Dowdle has been playing great, man. And like I said, I mean, really that's where the main offensive production was for the Panthers. Bryce Young only dropped back 20 times, completing 11 out of his 20 passing attempts for only 102 passing yards. The clear game plan was to run the football and run it at a high level, and they did with Dowdle. Receiving wise, Tedero McMillan led the Panthers with 4 receptions for 46 receiving yards, but like I said, passing wasn't really the main focal point of this game for them, and the Panthers, they did enough to win. They were really shocking a lot of people, and it was a great win for them, getting their 5th win of the year. This is Bryce Young's 4th straight win, starting obviously the week before against the Bills. Andy Dalton started and they ended up getting blown out, but regardless of that though, the Panthers, they got a great win on the road in conference in the NFC against an NFC opponent too, so that really just makes a huge difference. And the Panthers also have the same amount of wins at 5 right now through week 9. That's so many wins they had last year for the entirety of the 2024 season. So Panthers, they're doing a lot of great things right now. For the Packers, they're dealing with a lot of adversity from a Tucker Kraft being out for the season standpoint, but also this offense just being consistent one week and inconsistent the next. But it was a great win for Carolina. Matthew Stafford continues to put on absolute offensive clinics for the Los Angeles Rams, and they blew out the Saints in his week 9 matchup, winning 34-10, as the Rams now have a 6-2 record and the Saints fall to an atrocious 1-8. I know y'all saw that no-look pass from Matthew Stafford Stafford. That was absolutely disgusting. And that pass was to Davante Adams, who we'll talk about Davante in a second. But let's just give Matthew Stafford his flowers. 37 years old and still playing at this high level, being one of the most talented throwers of the football of all time and one of the best quarterbacks, frankly, that we've seen of all time too. In this game, he completed 24 out of his 32 passing attempts for 281 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. And Kyren Williams in the running game was very dynamic. The play action was really thriving in this game. Kyren Williams had 25 carries for 114 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. And Blake Corum added into the running game as well, having 13 carries for 58 rushing yards. And let's talk about Puka and Davante Adams. They're obviously a top 5 wide receiver duo in the league. Puka Nacua had 7 receptions for 95 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. And then Davante Adams, he had 5 receptions for 60 receiving yards and 2 receiving touchdowns. And those touchdowns are a theme for Davante Adams, as Davante has had 5 touchdowns in his last 2 games, 2 in this one and 3 against the Jacksonville Jaguars before their bye week. They're just clicking and playing at a high level. Tyler Higbee also had a receiving touchdown too. And their defense thrived as Emmanuel Forbes Jr. had an interception and Braden Fisk had a sack. Tyler Shuck too, debuting in this game in his first official start, was kind of what you expected, completing 15 out of his 24 passing attempts for 176 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Not too much to be expected for the Saints. Like I said, it's been a putrid season for them, and they're just a deficiency of talent. And I mean, from a trading perspective, it may look like that they end up trading Rashid Shaheed. Of course, I'm gonna, like I said, talk about the trades potentially that happened with this NFL trade deadline, things like that too. But the Saints are just not, and that hasn't mattered for the past couple of seasons. But like I said, man, the Rams, they're playing at a high level, one of the best teams in the NFC and NFL overall. And it's gonna be interesting to see who truly wins that NFC West division, because the Rams are playing at a high level, the Seahawks are playing at a high level, and the 49ers, they're still in the thick of it as well too. So that's a really great division. But this was a great win for the Los Angeles Rams. The Raiders going for 2 in overtime with that Geno Smith pass really is a nutshell of the Raiders season, as the Raiders lost this game in overtime 30-29 as the Jacksonville Jaguars advanced to a 5-3 record and the Las Vegas Raiders fall to 2-6. And it really sucks for the Raiders because they saw the return of a Brock Bowers after their bye week, really showing a lot of semblance to the performance and season that he had last year in his rookie year, as he had 12 receptions for 127 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns, being one of the best, if not the best, tight ends in the league, even despite him being so young. But overall though, the season, like I said, it's just been a very underwhelming one for the Raiders. Yes, injuries have played a role. It also doesn't help that Geno Smith has been so inconsistent this year. And I mean, he didn't play bad in this game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but like I said, he's liable to give you an interception in the game for sure, as he has had 11 interceptions already in the season. But in this game, he completed 29 out of his 39 passing attempts for 284 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. Like I said, 3 to Brock Bowers and 1 receiving touchdown to Ashton Genty, who was more utilized in a receiving game, as from a running standpoint, he only had 13 carries for 42 rushing yards. But in the receiving game, he had 5 receptions for 47 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. And it's interesting because Jacoby Myers
Was actually just traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars, as the Raiders are receiving a 4th and a 6th round pick for Myers, sending him to Jacksonville. So I think that's a pretty solid trade for the Raiders to get that type of command for him, especially on an expiring deal.
For this Raiders team, man, I mean, it's just been a very tumultuous season. Like a lot of other teams, I just talked about the Saints earlier. It just hasn't been beautiful. But for the Jaguars, they ended up persevering and winning this game, even with players like a Travis Hunter, who's on IR right now, things to that nature. Offensively, they're able to put on a performance on both sides to end up winning the game, and that's what mattered most. Trevor Lawrence completed 23 out of his 34 passing attempts for 220 passing yards. No touchdowns, 1 pick. He did have 2 rushing touchdowns though, and the rookie Bashil Tootin had a rushing touchdown, and Travis Etienne Jr. had 22 carries for 84 rushing yards. They just made plays when they needed to. Parker Washington has also been solid for this team overall this year, having 8 receptions for 90 receiving yards in this game. And Brian Thomas Jr., who for some stupid reason has been involved in trade conversations, which makes no sense. This is his 2nd season. It's not even, and it's finally only halfway through his 2nd year. He's been one of the better wide receivers in the league since entering the league last year. It makes no sense that he's involved in those conversations. But in this game, he had 3 receptions for 55 receiving yards. The game plan from Liam Cohen should be to get Brian Thomas Jr. the football more often. But like I said, ultimately they win this game, and that's the most important thing. Their defense allowed Geno Smith to play solidly, but like I said, they made plays in the end to win the game. Brown had that interception for the game, and overall, the Jaguars had 2 sacks on the game too. So they did enough to win this game, taking care of business, moving on to a 5-3 record. This was the 10th regular season meeting between Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, as the Bills faced the Kansas City Chiefs again in the regular season. And like a constant thing for the Bills against the Chiefs in the regular season, they won, winning 28-21, as the Bills now have a 6-2 record and the Chiefs fall to 5-4. It's a constant theme. The Bills are 5-1 in the Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes era in the regular season, but 0-4 against the Chiefs in the playoffs. And ultimately, that's where it matters most. And I know, I mean, there's still a long season left and things of that nature as well too, but people aren't gonna put too much weight on this win. They want to see Buffalo do it in the playoffs, or just win in general at a high level. But I mean, it doesn't diminish the type of performance that the Bills put on all 3 phases of the game, but specifically offensively and defensively, because a lot of people, at least from a game planning standpoint, know and recognize with the Buffalo Bills, you can run the football against them. Look, a few weeks ago, that game between the Falcons and the Bills, Bijan Robinson absolutely had his way. But for the Chiefs though, they don't necessarily have a strong running game, and it showed in its entirety. And the Bills were able to peel their ears back and rush the passer and cover cover at a high level. Patrick Mahomes, I mean, he really didn't have a great game at all, especially from a passing standpoint, only completing 15 out of his 34 passing attempts. That's only a 54% completion percentage, throwing for 250 passing yards and 1 pick, no passing touchdowns. Kareem Hunt had a rushing touchdown and Rashee Rice had the other rushing touchdown, but besides that, man, I mean, the offense at times was just very limited, and like I said, they're lacking a dominant running game. Imagine Patrick Mahomes having a solid to respectable, not even just running back, but a running back duo. That would make wonders for the Chiefs offense, and ultimately at times they become very one-dimensional, and we'll see how their offense continues to evolve, things to that nature. But especially when you have Isaiah Pacheco not playing this game and Kareem Hunt is your lead back, it's not going to necessarily serve the best things. Maybe they didn't run the ball enough, because Kareem Hunt, he did have 11 carries for 49 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown like I mentioned, but they got past happy in this matchup. Rashee Rice though has definitely been a huge boost to this offense since he made his return after serving that 6-game suspension, as he had 4 receptions for 80 receiving yards. Hollywood Brown had a couple of explosive plays, having 2 receptions for 73 receiving yards, and Travis Kelce had 4 receptions for 66 receiving yards in that 2-point conversion. But I mean, the Bills, like I said, they just put on a better performance overall on both sides of the football. Josh Allen completed 23 out of his 26 passing attempts for 273 passing yards and 1 touchdown. James Cook continues to be, like I said, besides Josh Allen on the team, the best offensive threat for this team, and I feel like he didn't even get going like he should have, and he still had 27 carries for 114 rushing yards, and Josh Allen also had those 2 rushing touchdowns. Dalton Kincaid really played effectively and at a high level in this game, as he had 6 receptions for 101 receiving yards and 1 receiving touchdown. Khalil Shakir also added in 7 receptions for 43 receiving yards, and defensively, like I said, the Bills were able to put on a great performance, I would say, for the most part. Joey Bosa was very involved as well too. He had a sack on the game. Greg Rousseau had a half sack. Christian Benford had a sack as well too, and Michael Hoyt had a half sack as well. So they played at a high level. The rookie Maxwell Harrison had an interception in this game too. So the Bills, if they can play like this against the Chiefs specifically, but overall in the postseason, that'll show wonders for sure. But ultimately right now, both of these teams are in positions that they're not frankly used to, as the Bills are second in their division behind the Patriots still, as the Patriots now have a 7-2 record, and the Chiefs, they're still behind teams like the Broncos and the Los Angeles Chargers in the AFC West. So something they're not used to, but it's a good thing overall for these teams, the league in general, that it's only week 9 and there's still halfway of the season to go to determine those playoff standings and ultimately how these teams will do. But it was a great and classic matchup and a great win for the Buffalo Bills.
All right, guys, so for these final 2 games, I just wanted to record them really quickly because the Seahawks-Commanders game, that was really a blowout. The Seahawks won 38-14. Sam Darnold looked surgical. Jackson Smith-Njigba continues to have one of the best receiving seasons of this year. But also, I mean, we saw the trade that the Seahawks had. They traded for a Rashid Shaheed for the New Orleans Saints, so that's a big thing there. And for the Commanders, their season is probably lost, man. Jaden Daniels having a dislocated elbow. We all know and recognize that he shouldn't have been in the game at that point. Dan Quinn even admitted so in his Monday press conference. But yeah, I mean, that game was largely unentertaining. I mean, but like I said, they traded for Rashid Shaheed, so that's going to add another explosive weapon opposite of Jackson Smith-Njigba to that offense. It's already playing at a high level. Couple that with their defense. The Seahawks are truly, like I said throughout the video, them and the Rams are going to be key fixtures in the NFC West. It's going to be interesting to see who wins that division. And the NFC is loaded this year, guys. It really is. So I think that's the biggest thing to take away from that game. Now for the final game for NFL Week 9, we had the matchup between the Cardinals and the Cowboys. The Cardinals won 27-17. Y'all know I'm an objective person, so I'm not biased. I'm a Cowboys fan for sure, but I mean, we didn't learn anything new about this team. The Cowboys defense is not good. The offense, I mean, they have to play perfect every single game, and that caught up to them. They only had 10 points in this game, and the defense added 7 points from that punt block that they had with Sam Williams. But yeah, man, Jacoby Brissett went off. Marvin Harrison Jr. absolutely baked DaRon Bland. Oh my goodness, it was insane. That ankle breaker that I had in the intro of the video, crazy. But yeah, I mean, this team is 3-5-1 going into the bye week, going into NFL Week 10. A lot of Cowboys fans and people have that little glimmer of hope because the Cowboys started off 3-5 in the 2018 season. They made that trade for Amari Cooper, and they ended up going 10-6, and then making it to the playoffs, winning a playoff game, and losing to the Rams in the divisional round. Don't see anything like that happening for this team, but you never know. Anything is possible in this league. This league, all you got to do is get hot, especially this season when there's no definitive, dominant team. But man, it's just not looking great for the Cowboys right now. I'm not going to lie. And yeah, it's very bleak, but I mean, a perfect time for a bye week for them for sure to hopefully get things going. Like I said, they make multiple trades that can help their defense, but ultimately though, this team is not just one move away, even 2 or 3 moves away, and they're going to really need to rebuild this defense in the offseason because their offense is one of the best in the league, as we know usually. But I mean, of course, the past couple of weeks it hasn't been great. But we'll see what they end up doing, man. But yeah, the Cardinals, I mean, they needed a great win because they lost 5 in a row, so now they have a 3-5 record, and the Cowboys are 3-5-1. So what we learned for NFL Week 9, I mean, not really too much. Like I said, we're at the midpoint, so we're kind of having an idea of who are some of the great contenders in the league. But I wanted to get a little bit more on the trade deadline, things of that nature too. Like I said, Rashid Shaheed going to the Seahawks, that's a huge move for them. Sauce Gardner being traded to the Colts for 2 first-round picks.
That's insane. Also, A.D. Mitchell is now on the Jets too, including in that trade. I ain't gonna lie, that's a lot of capital to go to the Jets and for Sauce Gardner. But I mean, hey, the Colts are truly all in. They're showing that they're behind Daniel Jones as a quarterback, and they're having a real window they're trying to open up for sure. So, I mean, that's a good thing for them, I guess. But I wouldn't have traded 2 first if I was a franchise. But, hey, I mean, like I said, they're all into that. And Sauce Gardner just got that new contract from the Jets, too. So, he's going to be there for multiple years for sure. What other trade happened? Let's see. Oh, yeah. Also, of course, Logan Wilson going to the Cowboys. Talked about that a second ago. I mean, that's cool. Like I said, he's a solid linebacker, so that's not bad at all. But, I mean, I don't know, man. And if there's more trades, I mean, I'm going to add that onto this. So, yeah, but just a crazy week for NFL Week 9 for sure. And, of course, after I initially finished editing my video, all that stuff like that, before I posted it, though, so I'm going to add this to it. The Cowboys trade for Quentin Williams. Wow. Really good move. Trading their 2027 first-round pick, so it'll be from Dallas, not the Green Bay pick. And also 2026 second-round pick. I think that's a really good deal for Dallas. Adding some additional defensive tackle will help. Obviously, they traded for Kenny Clark, so he might end up being cut after the offseason, and they obviously re-signed also Digazua. So that helps not only from a run-stopping standpoint, but also from a pass rush standpoint, too. So we'll see if they make any more moves. Like I said, I'm posting this. This may be the last thing I add to the video. Y'all let me know in the comments below. Do y'all think that's a good move for Dallas? I think it is, obviously. He adds to that not only this year, but he has a few more years on his deal, and he's a 3-time All-Pro defensive tackle, one of the best in the league. So he has a really good move, and he's reunited with the defensive line coach for the Dallas Cowboys, Aaron Whitehide, who used to be the Jets defensive line coach. So I think that's a really good move for Dallas. Obviously, they traded for Logan Wilson too. But, yeah, I think, perfect opportunity for Dallas to really try to reinvigorate themselves and try to get ready for the stretch run, because after this Raiders game on Monday Night Football in week, 11, play against the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Lions. Tough stretch coming up, so we'll see how they are. They were 3-5 in 2018. I said that earlier, and then and they're 25-1 now. So if they're able to do like that season 2018, go from 3-5 to 10-6 and win a playoff game, to be 3-5-1 and potentially make the playoffs this year, that would be huge and monumental. But we'll see. But that's a good move for Dallas, I think so, for sure. Y'all let me know what y'all think.
Guys, this is why we love football. An amazing game for sure. And a lot more intriguing storylines going into the season. Like I said, the NFL is beautiful. Football is beautiful. We're in November now. So we're in the stretch for sure. So we're going to continue to learn a lot about these teams. But like I always say, y'all keep being blessed. Hit the like button and subscribe and turn on post notifications. Know that you are loved. I'm so grateful for you guys always. A lot more videos on the way, guys. Know that Jesus loves you. Keep him at the center of your life. God loves you and has so many great purposes for you guys always. So I'll keep being blessed and legendary. Y'all have a good one. Peace.